Hello, 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 everyone. Good night, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of Track and Field Business. And of course, this week we will be going live from the coach's corner. Of course, it is Thursday again. Can you believe it? It is Thursday again. Welcome each and everyone. And already I am seeing where some people are very, very early. Daniel England, welcome. Jackie Duhaney, Sandy, welcome each and everyone. And wherever you are in the world, we have another week of treat for you where we're going to be hearing from another Jamaican who he was also an athlete, but no, he is an outstanding track and field coach. And I'm not going to go any further. I'm just going to bring him in now. I hope you all had a good week. And of course, we're going to have a good night here. So help me to welcome Mr. Alton Mackenzie. Mr. Mackenzie, welcome. This man wears a lot of hats. He's a director. He's the director of track and field. He's a coach. He's a recruiter. But of course, I'm not going to tell any more of his story. I'm going to allow him to tell his story. Coach Mackenzie, welcome to Track and Field Business on HP Chat Track.
Heather, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me. We feel very privileged to be joining some good company with folks that you've had on before. And I'm looking forward to having a great conversation, sharing a little bit about my journey and talking track and field.
Thank you very much, Coach. And we're going to get right into business. Tell me a little bit about Alton before you even dream of becoming a coach. Which parish you're from, where you
Right.
went to, as we would call it, little school, basic
Yeah.
school, whatever. Just tell
Right.
me a little bit about your early childhood.
Well, it's funny. It's a very interesting journey. It started, my exposure to over wasn't a track. I'm actually from a horse family. Any Mackenzie involved in horse racing, that's more than likely somebody who's related to me. So I'm from Spanish Town. I grew up in Spanish Town. I actually went to St. Catherine Primary, but between Kingston, spending time with my father in Kingston and my mother in Spanish Town, um, ended up at Calabar, but we'll get to that. But St. Catherine Primary, that's walking distance from St. Jago. I don't know how I ended up. I didn't end up at St. Jago, but I ended up where I was supposed to be, I guess. But from a horse racing family, John Anthony Mackenzie is my father. Rest his soul. I passed away a few years ago, but entire family is in horse racing. My grandmother, a Hall of Famer, she passed away a few years as well. Rita Mackenzie, Hall of Famer in Jamaica's horse racing industry. My uncle, David Mackenzie, oldest jockey to win a race in Caribbean history at 69 years old. Also a Hall of Famer. I have an uncle who was a horse trainer, and then my another uncle who was a football player. So I'm actually probably the least talented of the athletes in my family. Just the average, decent runner. My uncle is also a Hall of Fame football player. Played for Jamaica. Played for Santos in the days of the Skill Cole and that era in the 70s and 80s. So I'm an average athlete. I was an average athlete coming from a traditional sports family, but started out seeing a lot of racing, but at the racetrack, not at the national stadium.
But you are from you have a rich legacy of horse racing in your family. How did you end up in track and field? Tell me about how
Yeah.
you switched from that rich legacy where everybody would have been encouraging you to go that route. How
Yeah.
is it that you ended up on the other side?
Well, it's funny. All of them were very quick. They have a lot. They had a lot of speed. My uncle, who played, actually ran for Oneonta State as well, but he was more of a football player. I have a cousin, David Mackenzie's son, Christopher Mackenzie, played in the NFL, played briefly in the NFL and then in the CFL. Was also pretty quick, but didn't want to. Track and field hurts. I outgrew the saddle. I got too big. I'm too big to be a jockey, and I guess I wasn't a good enough football player. I didn't have the skills to be a good football player, so I defaulted to track and field. But to tell you the story, what actually pulled me into track and field, and I'm going to show my age here, but 40 years ago, I don't know if you remember what happened 40 years ago, Bertrand Cameron became the first world champion in the 400. When he came back from Helsinki, the first place he went was my house, next door to my house. He's from St. Jago. Miss Anderson, who lived next to me on Brunswick Avenue, um, Bertrand Cameron being a St. Jago graduate, the first place he visited was there, and probably the first autograph he signed coming from Helsinki was an album that I brought next door and asked him to sign. So I would say if I would give you any connection to what first drew me into wanting to be in track and field was watching him compete at the World Championships, the first one ever, and winning 40 years ago.
Indeed.
And not to mention, a youngster going to Calabar and seeing Herb McKinley. I know, Daniel England can talk about that. He's a lot better than I was, but trust me, to be in his presence is something that it's intimidating. And so when your introduction as a 12 to 13-year-old is to athletes and coaches of that caliber, you end up finding yourself in the sport whether you wanted to or not. It kind
In
of pulls you in.
Indeed, indeed. You actually grew up or lived next door to St. Jago High School. Why Calabar over St. Jago, where your idol went to?
Yeah, well, they didn't recruit me. That's the first thing.
Oh,
But
they did not.
the other thing was, so my mother moved to New York. So my journey actually, I left Jamaica at 15 years old. So before my mother left, she left right when I was about to take exams. So I ended up putting my father's address and selecting Calabar and St. Jago, and I got took common entrance, and Calabar was the school that was selected based on my father's home address in Arlene Gardens, close to Hughenden. And so I lived with maybe about 10 other young men who went to Calabar. It was one person from two other schools, Camperdown, St. George's, and three schools, Camperdown, St. George's, and Campion. But everybody else, it was about 15 young men from Calabar. So I grew up in a Calabar neighborhood once I moved to Kingston to go to high school.
What
And
was
so,
your champ's journey like?
well, it's funny. So, I always say this to people. It's not everybody who ends up where I am now. You don't need to become a champ star to end up where I am now. I
Indeed.
don't have a very rich history at champs. I ran in class 3 in 1984, ran the hurdles, didn't make the finals. Somebody saw me at the Jamaica trials a few months ago and said the memory of me at champs was seeing me cry after not making the final in the hurdles. So my journey was, I left Jamaica right before the dynasty started with Calabar getting back to being on top. But I was exposed to a lot of high-level athletes. So Howard Davis, referred to as Birdman, Richard Buckner, Jabba, some of those guys. Those were my mentors. Patrick O'Connor. So I was a class 3 youngster trying to emulate them. And so I did everything. So I ended up running the 400 and 800 in college because I was one of those young men who figured to try everything. So I tried the long jump, 100, 200, 400, and then they ended up putting me in the hurdles. Hugh Powell, who was on some great 4x4s with Daniel England, was my year in class 3. So he ran class 3 400 when I was my first year class 3. And second year class 3, I made the team. And then first year class 2, I decided I'm not making this team. This team is too good. I'm going to become a football player. I'm not
It's
going to
too
run
big
anymore.
for you, right?
I can't make the team. So so I retired from track and field. Actually, when I left Jamaica in 1986, I wasn't running track and field. When I moved to New York, I was actually decided I was going to be a football player.
Is it that there was no system at your current high school overseas, or you just decided to call it a
I
day?
was done. When my last year in Jamaica, when I ran my first year class or second year class 3, my first year class 2, I decided I wasn't going to run. I'm not going to make the team. I had Stephen Golden, Chris Smith, those some of the hurdlers who I ran under. And I must say, if not for Mr. Coleman, I like throwing out names. Mr. Fitz Coleman is actually the person, he's a gentle giant. People don't really hear him speak a lot, but he's probably one of the best coaches that I've ever been exposed to. And probably if not for him, I wouldn't have even gotten the chance to try the hurdles, because I was running everything else. And he said, well, you look like you're willing to try everything. Let's put you in the hurdles. But yeah, when I moved to the US, I had stopped running. The hurdles hurt. The hurdles is a very unforgiving event.
It is.
After having some mishaps at champs, I decided I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just gonna go back to, I'm a footballer. That's what my family does. I'm gonna
So
be
in
a footballer.
college for you overseas,
Mhm.
did you continue playing sport? Did you switch to
Yeah.
another?
So I moved to the US at 15 in high school, and so my journey to track and field, and again, it's always a connection with Jamaican. So I don't know if you know the name Devon Morris made the team. They
Oh
call him
yes,
Helsinki. So
that's an Olympian. Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
his coach in Jamaica, he was in the JDF for a while. His coach Errol Lee ends up at Canarsie High School in Brooklyn as an assistant coach, and I was supposed to be running track to get in shape, to stay in shape for soccer, or soccer as they call it in the US.
Mhm. Mhm.
And in me staying in shape, he ends up seeing me run, and he's like, "Where did you go to school?" And I said, "Yeah, I went to Calabar." "Did you run at Champs?" "Yes." And that was it. He's like, "No, if you ran at Calabar and you ran at Champs, then you're supposed to be running." And so he kind of pulled me in and got me back to, wanting to be passionate and falling in love with track and field again. But it was, so I was supposed to be staying in shape. Nobody volunteers, no Jamaican volunteers to run the 800.
I know. I
So
know. I know. I know. So you basically stick with the books, with the academics.
yeah, I was, well, academics was a big part of when I moved to the US. My mother said, if you don't do well in school, you're going back to Jamaica. That was the deal. So
Smart mom.
yeah, my journey to Georgetown was more about the academic and athletic balance, being a student athlete. So I was pretty reputable academically. Again, as fortune would have it, Elliot Quao, who ran for the U.S. 1983, again the World Championships. To go back to that, for some reason that meet comes into my life in more ways than one. Elliot Quao ran for my high school at Canarsie, ends up going to Rutgers University, ends up running for my college coach by the time I got to Georgetown. So the Canarsie High School coach was told, if you find somebody like Elliot Quao, give me a call. I was the person. I just wasn't as fast. But
Wow.
academically, I was pretty reputable. I did my schoolwork. And so I was an average, 153, 800 runner going to Georgetown. But, Georgetown, late 80s, early 90s, was a dynasty in the middle distance. So
Mhm.
it was
Mhm.
more about me getting an opportunity to be a part of a program, something much, much bigger than me. And 4 years later, I ended up being an All-American as a part of the 4x8 indoor, and ended up as a team captain my senior year. So it was just more about me being able to stick to things and show leadership skills that more than likely steered me towards not just going to Georgetown, but being successful at Georgetown initially as a student athlete.
You are a big deal. I would say you are a big deal. You are a director of track and field at Georgetown. You're a coach, you're a recruiter. How did you get into coaching? What was the influence? I mean, apart from you being a Jamaican and that's what
Mhm.
we do, what
Yeah.
was your influence to really become a coach at this level?
Well, it's funny. I think Division two, if you coach at the Division two level, it prepares you to coach anywhere. So initially, my approach was having a marketing. I have a business background. I was a marketing major and an English minor. I thought about going into the business side of the sport. So think Adidas Grand Prix. A Georgetown alum was the director of marketing for that meet. So the first world record that Bolt broke, his first world record Bolt had, was in New York. I was a part of organizing that meet for years. So to answer your question, I was supposed to be on the business side of the sport. I was more thinking of approaching the sport from that angle, and it turned out other people saw something different from me. When I approached University of District of Columbia, the athletic director at the time was somebody who I knew from Georgetown, and I approached her about 12, 14 years ago. I approached her about wanting to get into the business side of sports, and assist her as she took on the role of the director, as being the athletic director, excuse me. And she said, actually, I think I think you would be a great fit to be a coach for us. And I said, yeah, I'm exposed to the sport a lot. I've always been involved in the sport. I've always had exposure to high levels of the sport. I mean, to me, training at Calabar as a 13-year-old and seeing the likes of Daniel England, Richard Buckner, Howard Davis, Patrick O'Connor, Stephen Golden, it was like an elite track club. And so I've always had exposure to high level and top, really, really high level athletics and coaches. And somebody else saw that in me. So she knew me from when I ran at Georgetown, and she said, "I think you're meant to be a coach. I think you should be coaching." So she
Track
begged me. She begged me to take the job, and I took the head coach job at University of the District of Columbia, and had some success there, and that laid the groundwork for me to years later end up going to coach at Georgetown as the associate head coach.
Brilliant, brilliant stuff. Track and field is a multidiscipline sport. How do you choose which part of the sport or which discipline you want to coach as it relates to sprinters, middle or long distance, field events? How do you choose?
Well, again, I think one of the blessings of being at a Division II school is you end up, if you're not careful, you have to coach everything. I think I like talking about what I see what other coaches do. I think I don't throw this word out a lot, but I think one of the people who I admire as a coach, he's a coaching genius to me. I look at coaches who can coach everything. So Stephen Francis is an influencer to me, where you don't need to. The more you know, the better you can apply your knowledge across the board. So you might have an interest to coach the sprints, you might have an interest to coach middle distance or field events, but the more versatile you are, the better of a coach you can be. And being the director of track and field at a university, you're going to have to find people who are like-minded and find the coaches that fit what you're looking for. And if you're not familiar with that area of interest, it might be harder for you to really find people who can do the job. So I don't want to coach everything. I mean, I primarily coach the sprints, long sprints, and short and long sprints. I've coached the jumps. I've had to coach the jumps before. I've had to coach the hurdles, but it is a lot to take on. But I think you might find where you feel most comfortable and you have the most interest. But I've found that coming from the Division II world and having to do a lot and do everything, it makes you a much more capable coach if you have the knowledge of across the board. And you
Indeed,
go in
indeed.
and you go and learn. You don't, nobody becomes an expert overnight. But like I said, I like using coaches who I see as an example. And Stephen Francis comes to mind when you ask that question. How do you get into which one you choose? You can deal with a lot of them. You don't necessarily have to be an expert in every one, but the more knowledge you have across different areas, the more to me, better equipped you can be as a head coach, and to be able to find people who can do the job for you if you want to hire somebody to fill those areas as well.
Indeed, finding the right fit, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. As the director of track and field, tell me a little bit about your portfolio. What are some of the responsibilities that you have as the director?
Well, I mean, you're overseeing the entire program. The biggest thing that comes with that is budget. So I think having a business degree, and I always go back to the value of having, the academic background and what your degree can help you to prepare for in a job down the road. A lot of it is balancing a budget, and you're running a company. So you're going to have a staff. There's always something to do. There's always things being thrown at you, but it's wearing a lot of different hats. Controlling the budget is one thing. Fundraising. So people think it's easy to just have a program and money thrown at you. You have to fundraise to make sure your program stays
Mm-hmm.
above board. And working with people, networking, knowing how to get what you need to get done by utilizing being a good communicator. And I have to look at everything. Social media comes across my portfolio as far as managing what's out there. If something is posted that's not appropriate, I'm the one that's going to get a call from my athletic director. But across everything, managing all aspects of what, from the first day the students get to campus to when they graduate, everything that comes in between that could be something that I have to deal with. community service. Like you're doing everything that is going to create a culture. To answer your question, Heather, you want to create a culture that fits what you're looking for as a head coach, and finding people who will fit that, whether it be your staff and along with the student athletes you bring in.
With such a busy, because you're a busy man. I know that. I've
Little bit.
seen that for myself, that that you're a busy man. How do you find time to actually coach with all the responsibilities that you have behind the scene? How do you find time to actually blow your whistle or to
Mm.
do a drill or something?
Well, finding good people to assist you. I think that's the biggest part of the job, is to make sure you have people around you who are not just in your corner, but on your side. So you have to make sure you have people who can do both. And so it's being able to delegate. I realize I can't do everything. I can't be at the NCAA cross country championships at the same time that our sprinters and jumpers have a workout that Saturday. So if I don't have an assistant who I'm confident can manage it while I'm not there, then that's a problem. So learning to delegate, and I don't coach everybody, so I hired a jumps and hurdles coach, and I've said to her, I don't want to coach any of that at all. That's your job, and I'm giving them the leverage to do that. And so it is challenging. It's a full team. I'm directing both the men and women, and so it does take some work. But the biggest part is to find people who are capable of multitasking, but also being focused on ensuring they can do their job without you having to micromanage what they're doing. I like giving my coaches leverage to do what they need to do. And you know, I got this job in COVID. I became the head coach in the midst of COVID in 2020. And if I didn't have people who fully understood like what we needed to do to make sure things worked, it would have been hard to maintain. And majority of that staff is still with me 3 years later.
Brilliant. You wear a lot of hats. When someone say that they are a recruiter, what does that mean really? What does that mean in the world of sport?
Well, it's for me. I'll go back to one of the things that I've always said to people. It's not just looking at how fast people have run. It's easier to look at times. With track and field, the marks are the marks, the times are the times. But 10-5 in Boston is not 10-5 in Florida. So you have to be perceptive with what you see. You need to look, and I've learned this from the first coach that I was exposed to was my father, being a horse trainer. I'm not necessarily comparing athletes to horses, but it's similar. You have to coach by what you see. You have to have a good eye. So the first thing is not just focusing on how fast people have run currently or how far they've jumped, is looking to see where you could find diamonds in the rough, or find where people have not really hit the ceiling yet. They're still on the floor. So being a good recruiter to me is you have to be aggressive with going out there. Technology allows you to see a lot more than what you would have seen 30 years ago. But also 30 years ago, if you were networking, you can create pipelines, and people kind of have an understanding of what you're looking for. And so you build relationships. So a lot of my coaching experience and recruiting in New York, people who know what the type of athletes that I'm looking for, the coaches are going to call me and tell me, yes, I think this is somebody you should recruit based on what you're looking for. And then you look. So horses can talk and tell you what's wrong, or how they're going to run. And I've learned that watching my father train horses, is you coach by what you see. You have to pay attention and be attentive, and do the eye test. So for me, being a recruiter, the biggest thing is being able to spot talent, but not necessarily the ones that everybody is already looking at.
Indeed. How much do you have to stay up to date with the latest trends as it relates to development in the industry that applies to recruiting?
For me, you never stop learning. So we're in a technology world. We're in a social media world. I'm not a big social media person, but I've had to become more versed at it. You have to go where where this generation is going. So since I'm not big into it, you hire an assistant who might be able to do that. So I think that's one piece. But also you have to keep learning. A lot of young people now have access to technology that they can become so-called expert in I can go and find it on YouTube, or I can go and find it online. That's a mindset that you have now, where people think they can get the information they need. So you have to keep learning. My college coach, God rest, he's still around. He's 86 years old, and 4 or 5 years ago, he was still telling me of new stuff that he was being exposed to. Being open to technology, but also still going old school, kind of the dabbling in both worlds. So I use technology in the weight room. Strength and conditioning coach has some devices that we use to measure explosiveness, and I could tell based on looking at somebody if they're fatigued, and that might just give me some reassurance that what I'm seeing is accurate. But using it in a way where we're both looking at what we see and what the data shows us. And so we're in an analytical world now, but for me, it's kind of being able to balance both. You can't rely on technology, but you
On just
also,
one.
yeah, but you have to be able to manage looking at both.
Tell me about your strategy or technique that you use to build relationships and maintain them, like with coaches, athletes, families, especially the parents. How do you maintain and build that relationship during your recruiting process?
I'm very transparent. So, it's the honeymoon phase. You want to tell them everything they want to hear. I don't do that. I'm very, very detailed and very upfront with what we can offer. My biggest thing is I want people who want to be at the university first and foremost, because I don't want to paint this picture that it's a perfect place. But building the relationship with the student athlete is paramount to what's going to allow them to be successful in college. I found that you want to be involved with the parents, but you also want to give them the understanding, like once the student athlete gets to school, you can't help them to get to class or train. Like they're going to be on their own. And if they're not accustomed to having that level of independence, they're going to at times run with it and not know how to manage it. So from the recruiting process, I want to start where I'm building that understanding. With coaches, I've built relationships I'm a people person. And so during COVID, I didn't like the
The
Zoom.
lockdown.
Yeah, I didn't like the Zoom, recruiting over Zoom, or Zoom meetings. I didn't enjoy that. I'm more of a people person, and my kids and my spouse tell me I know too many people. It's a good thing knowing a lot of people, so that helps. For me, it's building relationships, and people have an understanding of the type of person you are. And I think I'm a pretty genuine person, pretty transparent, so I'm upfront with during the recruiting process, just telling them, being open and honest from the get-go.
How do you handle a delicate situation where you approached an athlete, but they did not make the cut? What kind
Mm.
of advice do you give that athlete moving forward?
You want to be respectful, but also share that the glass is always half full. So giving them the understanding that if we're not a fit, there's somebody else that's going to be a fit. And to be honest, there are more people that I don't get than I get. So if I recruit 25 people, if I'm lucky, I get 5. And so it's usually I tell them they're more in control of the process than they realize. And so if they advocate for themselves and ensure that they have options, they'll be fine. And so sometimes when it doesn't fit, it's not necessarily that it's not a fit because I don't want them to be there. It's usually because they have other options. And so it goes both ways. But being respectful and giving them the leverage to know, this is partially it's a business as well. Collegiate
It is.
athletics is a big business, but you're also dealing with people. So you're coaching with some empathy and being passionate about the sport, but also being empathetic to relationships and being respectful of people. Just treat people how you want them to be treated.
Earlier, you mentioned technology, and of course, we're living in the age of technology. But what role does online scouting and social media helps with your recruiting efforts? Do you follow athletes on social media? Look at what they're posting. Tell me a little bit about how you use social media to recruit, if you do.
So you remember you asked me about how much hats or how many things I have on my plate. That's one of the things that I delegate. So I do have one of my assistants who, you know, direct messages athletes, checks on Twitter, finds out what they post. So that's definitely something we do. Um, Instagram, there are people who there've been athletes who've reached out to me based on something they saw us post on Instagram. I have an athlete who's famous for recording me doing interesting things. I went viral for dancing at one practice, and I got calls from Jamaica just from that video that was posted. I'm like, how did you see that? So it definitely adds. It's a different element of one other thing you have to be aware of. I try to delegate that because if I think the phone is people were worrying about if the vaccine was a chip. Well, the phone is the chip. Everything is on the phone, and I think there's a
Indeed.
lot there's a lot of positives with using the phone, but there's also it can get to a point where it gets a little bit much. But you have to be aware of what student athletes are looking at now, and if they're on their phones looking at Instagram and on social media, then you need to be aware and have some presence there as well. But I'm more substance over hype, so it's a little more of a balance for me.
Indeed, indeed. There are rules and there are rules and there are rules.
Mhm.
In the context of the collegiate, how do you navigate the complex NCAA rules, and regulations throughout your recruitment process? I know that earlier you said you're very transparent, but
Mhm.
with these rules and Title IX and all those fancy things, how do you navigate?
Well, you need to have a very good relationship with your compliance officer. Very critical to understand. It's interesting. We had training like 2 days ago. There's always legislation being looked at, rules they want to change. You need to be aware and stay on top of that. You need to pay attention. Things change. You look at the rules surrounding the transfer portal. That's going to change. It's going to continue evolving. NIL, name, image, and likeness. There's a lot of to
I
dos
was
and
just about to ask you
yes,
about that, but go right into
yes,
it. Go
yes.
right into it.
There's a lot of to dos and not to dos that compliance would talk about. What we can do, and so it's a very delicate thing where you have to be mindful of not doing things that could get your university in trouble, but also being mindful of everybody's kind of pushing the edge to see how much they can do. But in answering your question, it's always changing. You have compliance that will keep us abreast of what's going on, but we also have to kind of keep our ears to the street. We have a coaches convention every year. We're also going there to vote on potential new legislation. But you definitely want to have to make sure you're keeping yourself aware of what's going on, and a lot of that comes through um, having a compliance department that is on top of what's going on in the industry.
Going back to Neil a little
Mhm.
bit, your thoughts on Neil. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it's not. It doesn't hit track and field across the board as big. So the revenue generating sports are what you will see a lot of the NIL money is going towards. So in football, American football, and basketball. That's primarily a lot of what will drive student athletes getting NIL money. But there's still some opportunities for they call them the Olympic sports. They're track and field athletes making good NIL money, but the key is that as a coach, it's not legal for me to tell an athlete what I can get them for an NIL deal, right? They have to be mindful of what is out there. They have to do that research on their own. But the biggest advice is you need to know what you're signing. So
Indeed.
a lot of athletes, some of the more I would say high profile athletes too, if they're not careful, you're signing NIL deals where the agents are not getting involved and helping you get an NIL deal. And once that becomes a part of the conversation, you have to be mindful of what's a fine print. And
Do-
so my thought on NIL is initially it's basketball and football. It's gonna go into some of the other. It's gonna go into lacrosse and baseball next. If you think of in the U.S. especially, what's marketable and what gets visibility. If anything that's going to be on TV, that's going to be more likely to create more revenue or more attention. So your image and likeness can be something that adds value to a company. For some of the smaller NIL deals, it could be something as simple as a restaurant giving you a meal and you post something on social media 4 times. That might seem like a not a big deal, but ask a college student who's tired of going to the cafeteria if they would be willing to get a free meal over the entire year for posting stuff. So even to something that small, it does have some value. So my view on it is it does have some value, but what we have to be careful of is the bigger it gets, the more money that you're talking about. There's everybody who wants, everyone wants to get a piece of that pie. And once you're monetizing a student athlete, they have to be conscious of what they're branding or what somebody's utilizing them to sell.
Do you think more student athletes will stay in school and finish now, or we're still going to see where athletes are maybe after a year or two they leave and go pro?
It depends. You're gonna have the cases where they're gonna be young athletes where the money that's being thrown at them, it's hard for their families to say no. And if you look at the trend, I think there's more younger athletes leaving before they even go to college. So it's not even the ones who are going to college a year or two and leaving. It's in some cases they're not even going to college. And I've always said this, it's getting a pro contract doesn't mean you can't go to school. And so there have been cases people wouldn't have realized this. Alison Felix went to school. She didn't go in college, but she was at USC getting her degree. When Sonia Richards left Texas, she didn't leave school. She stayed in school. Audrey Wilson didn't go to college. She was going to Temple. So there's some assumption that if you're not running for the school, that means you're not going to school. If it makes sense, you can. It's just, to me, college keeps you in a place where you can be more disciplined. When you turn pro as an elite athlete, it's a whole different ballgame. You're paying for the massage, your masseuse, you're paying for treatment. There's a lot of expenses that get taken out if you're a college student. You have the training room, you have a training staff at that university to address that. When you turn pro, that's gone. And so it depends, again, what club you're a part of, if that makes sense for you. Sometimes you have to be careful you're not jumping from something that it looks nice, but it doesn't mean that it makes sense for you. And that's why you see sometimes some young professionals, young athletes, when they initially turn pro, it takes them some time to transition because it's a different world. In the college system, everything is pretty much taken care of for you. You're dealing with travel, you don't have to worry about any of that. All that is taken care of. When you turn pro, it's a different ballgame.
Whose job is it, though, coach, to ensure that the baby athletes, the youngsters, are well educated about the business side of the sport or the industry itself?
Mhm.
Whose job is that really?
Unfortunately, it's them you have to have the right people around to do that. If you're in a situation where a 17 or 18-year-old doesn't have the people around them to educate them, or to ensure that they're finding information they need, it's going to be hard. They're going to learn the hard way. But I think that the onus is on them. If you're thinking that you want to do that professionally, if you don't have a good support system around you, you could have parents who are very supportive, but that doesn't mean they have knowledge of what the business entails. It's to find the information and ask the right questions. So I think if you're the same thing with name, image, and likeness. It's if you're willing to not put yourself as a brand, some of the onus is going to come on you to make sure that you're doing your homework to find out what exactly you're putting your name to. And so, yes, you want to have people around them to support them. Yes, we get that. You want to have a support system around them to ensure that they're getting the details they need. But in this technology age, they claim they can find everything. So, go do your homework, do a little
They
bit
have
more
the
homework.
smartphone, so do
Yes.
some
So,
homework.
yes. Yeah.
Coaches in general do a lot of stuff. It's not just about going out there to coach someone to run. I mean, they've developed their athletes psychologically and all the alleys that you can think of. Do you find yourself mentoring athletes or assisting athletes in order to meet their academics and their sport responsibilities?
I
Do
think
you get caught up in that as a coach?
Absolutely. I think that's probably the bigger part of the job, even as a college coach. Most of what I'm going to deal with to get someone to the meet to be prepared to perform at their best is 80% of it is what they're doing outside of the time that they're with me or in the classroom. It's, are they getting enough sleep? Are they eating right? Are they having issues, social issues? They're dealing with relationship issues. Majority of what I'm spending my time addressing is not necessarily directly related to when they're competing. It's more related to the outside thing. So absolutely, mental health is a big issue in this day and age. I think the the phone creates this environment where there's a lot of information thrown at young people, and I think some of them have a hard time managing that. So you use resources. A lot of it isn't necessarily just on me, but ensuring that, for example, Georgetown has a sports psychologist on staff. At times when I feel like the conversations start with me, but for them to continue, it might be, getting additional help. But I'm definitely a part of ensuring that you need to talk to them. They have to trust you. You get to the point where they'll run through a wall for you, so to speak. And some of that comes from building a good relationship and trust. But absolutely, the mentorship and the time spent speaking with student athletes is more, to me, more effective than just what you do in training.
During COVID, a lot has changed since the pandemic in 2020. A lot of how we do things has changed. For you, has things gone back to normal, or or you've changed the way you do things, especially as it relates to recruiting? Is the process the same? Coaching the same?
So a very good question. It's a new normal. When we started the semester, up to a year ago, we were still, at least specific to Georgetown, we were still not allowed to have recruits on campus to stay in the dorm. So COVID is still a reality. It's still going on. It's maybe not as to the extent that it was a year ago. It's not the same, or 2 years, but we still have the mindset. I'm still of the opinion that I don't want to have recruits necessarily staying on campus. So that's one big change. They want to see campus, but one person tests positive, that could wipe out my whole training group or a group of student athletes. So it's a new normal. You're more mindful of how much exposure, how much time you're spending with them. But we're going back to being in a place where it feels more like it was prior to 2020. It's still a work in progress, but like I said, it's a new normal. But I'm still mindful of, if somebody is sick, you don't come to practice. Or if I had recruit on campus and 2 days later you hear, oh, this recruit had COVID, and you're worried, like, what if this person was actually staying on campus in a dorm? And so you're still mindful of it. It's not, and it depends where you are in the country. So it depends on where you are. DC was to me very strict. We were the only school in the Big East Conference who in the year that of COVID didn't have our student athletes on campus. So we were very, very strict. And then once they came back, they were on the same floor. And so we kind of went through that stage. And when you go through that as a team,
Mm-hmm.
you're a little bit more mindful of trying to keep each other healthy.
Indeed, wow, I tell you, it is something, as you say, the new norm. And we just have to, what they say, only the strong survive. We have to
Mhm.
know how to adapt. What advice, though, would you give to aspiring student athletes who want to make a career out of track and field or any sport at all? What kind of advice would you give those athletes, especially if they're trying to seek scholarship, to find their way through a scholarship?
And I really like that question. I think especially, I'm going to be biased and speak to Jamaica. I think one of the mistakes that is being made in Jamaica is the process. They're starting the process too late. In the U.S. system, there are high schoolers who are on campus as sophomores and juniors doing unofficial visits. If you're in Jamaica, you might not have the capacity to do that in the U.S., but you need to start the process very early. Um, the SAT is becoming something that's waived. Most universities are waiving it. I think it's still an added value as an asset on your resume. It can help you to potentially get academic money. The biggest thing I would say to students is, with this technological world, you can't rely on just waiting for the coach to call you. We got access to 800 runner from Italy, and agency reached out to us. We didn't know about him. It was a 148.5 800 runner, and how we got access to him was because a recruiting agency, reached out to us about him. You
When
need
you
to.
say earlier,
Mhm.
explain a little bit what you
Your
mean by earlier.
so your second year at Champs Class One. I can't be at Champs, and I'm just hearing about you. What you're doing at Champs, your second year Class One, is too late for me. It's already too late. Um, Second year Class Two, you should be already starting to look at what schools you're interested in. You should be,
Interesting.
you shouldn't be waiting until you're in Class One to do that.
But do they know this though, coach?
I'm not
Do
sure
you
if
think they
yeah.
know that this is what they need to do, or this is the process, or this is the best way?
Maybe not as much as they should. I think Daniel is a good example of trying to start that conversation early. Um, mentioning him intentionally.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
he's done some work in the past to try to give student athletes exposure to college options early. In other sports, in soccer and lacrosse, they're signing from their junior year before they get into their senior year. They're already signed. So what's that telling you? You need to be looking in the process a lot earlier. The money, and let me give you the other example. The transfer portal makes you coming in as a freshman. I don't need to take you as a freshman. I can go on the transfer portal and get talent right away. They don't need to sit out. They can come and perform. They've been exposed to college already. They have the experience. You coming in as a freshman, you need to be more mindful that they're going to be. It's the landscape has changed, and in a good and bad way. It goes both ways. But the fact that the transfer portal allows people to, I'm not too happy, find one thing that I'm not happy about, and I can go somewhere else, and I'm not going to have to sit out. I don't have to sit out any time at all. That makes it really more competitive for you coming as a freshman. So you can't wait till you're at the last part of your season, your senior year. That's not something that, at least that doesn't work for me, because we're a very rigorous school academically. So our application deadline is a lot earlier than most schools.
I think one of the problem that we have is that enough information is not being thrown at our student athletes.
I would
And
agree.
because of that, most of them might not start looking around until it's time to graduate, or,
Correct.
a few months before graduation, they're now thinking, I would love to get a scholarship. It's my final year at Champs.
Correct.
I want to break a record, or I want to run a certain time, and hopefully, and as you said, by that time it would have been maybe too late. But
Yes.
I I am always in defense of the athletes, especially the younger ones.
Absolutely. I agree.
And I think the problem is that enough information is not being thrown at them. So sometimes they don't know.
Right.
Sometimes they're clueless how to navigate the next step, how to get to the next step.
I agree, absolutely. And the onus is on, I put some of that on the coaches as well. You have to look beyond what the values that they're going to add for you at the high school level. The truth is, the coaches have there's a lot of trust being put in them to take care of what's going to be taken care of. And there's just needs to be an understanding from the student athletes that you need to learn to advocate for yourself. And it's hard. Some of them are not from an environment where they have exposure to information, or it's easy for them to do that. They've just put all their energy into, I'm going to run fast, I'm going to jump far, I'm going to throw far, and the coach is going to take care of figuring out what's next. But some of that, you're going to be the one that's there. You're going to be the one that has to deal with where you go somewhere that's cold or wherever you may end up. You're going to be the one that's there. So you need to be making sure that you're, fully engaged and fully informed on what the process entails.
I
And I know it's not
totally
easy.
I totally agree with you. It's something I've been advocating for a while now. I keep saying that I think student athletes in our schools in Jamaica should be exposed to information. The minute they become a student athlete, we should start teaching them about this business of sport, this career of sport, and give them enough information. So by the time they get to, as you said, first year class one, they would know in their mind where they want to go. But because we're not teaching them, some of them get to even graduation and not sure what's the next step.
That's true. That's true. And they don't realize it's more competitive. The world is
It
global.
is. It
People can
is.
recruit anywhere. And
It,
Jamaica will always remain a major talent pool for track and field. But like I said, the world is more global. So we just even in the high school landscape in Jamaica, the landscape has changed. It's now it's the
it's
high school national
crazy.
championship is a global meet.
Yeah.
It's no longer just Jamaica national. So even from that perspective, they need to be paying attention to how more competitive it is to be earning scholarships compared to other schools or to other student athletes.
Yeah. In everything, there are challenges. Tell me about some of your challenges that you've encountered in your career so far, because you're still pretty young. As a director, as a coach, as a recruiter, tell me a little bit about some of your challenges and how you've overcome those challenges.
I think as a Division two school, what we did when I was at the University of District of Columbia, I never had somewhere to train indoor. We trained in the hallways. So I built a team that ended up fourth at the national championship indoor that were doing repeat 200s in a hallway on a concrete floor.
Wow.
So and so you kind of you find people who are resilient who are willing to deal with that. I found a lot of
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
New Yorkers, Jamaicans. Find people who weren't afraid to challenge themselves, and regardless of what the obstacles are, where they're going to be successful. Even at Georgetown, we're not a school that has everything. We don't have a 400-meter track, but we figure out a way to ensure that we're prepared for everything. I like coaching people who have a little bit of chip on their shoulders. So
You're a true Jamaican. We know
yeah.
how to make it work. We know
Yes,
how to
yes,
make it work.
yes,
And before you go further, Daniel England just put through a comment. I don't know if you're seeing it on your
yes. I'm
screen.
seeing it.
Yeah, he's saying that the high school coaches need to create policy and roadmaps so that the athletes can follow. And I totally agree with
Yes,
him saying that between the school and the coaches, they need to be thinking about our student athletes after champs, after high
absolutely.
school.
I agree 100%. And again, but some of it, he can speak to this. He's helped to create that environment, but the follow up, what's next? Like he would do that, but are they going to follow that roadmap? Are they going to have it in front of them and utilize it? And to me, that's the part where, for me, the challenge is acting on it. He's done it. There's been examples of them having it, but the follow up and the next step, that's the part where I'm a little bit concerned. They're
Mm-hmm.
complacent. They're complacent and they're waiting for somebody else to do it. Matter of a lot of I've gotten athletes. Most of the athletes that I've gotten from Jamaica, in cases when I was at UDC, they're athletes who the one that was the most talented wasn't the one that I ended up getting. It was the one that did everything to make sure I had everything I needed for them to get there.
Wow. We have to do a little bit more, though. We have to do a little bit more to push the youths. We have to put the information out there, have workshops,
Yes,
in the schools, and have career day, whatever we want to call it, so that the athletes can at least have some information so they can make informed decision as it
absolutely.
relates to them moving forward. But going back to your challenges
Hmm.
anymore, do you have any more?
There's a lot.
Yes.
I would say I don't have a big coaching staff. I probably have the smallest coaching staff in the entire Big East Conference. So I do a lot with very little. Um, I view challenges as opportunities. So maybe that's why I'm not as vocal to share with you all the challenges that I've faced because
And that's fine. That's
yeah,
fine.
my view is that they're opportunities. Challenges are just opportunities to be successful, and so
Indeed.
I've been fortunate to find people who are like-minded and willing to overlook some of the challenges that we have. We have one of the best steeplechasers. We have the third fastest steeplechaser in college history, Parker Stokes. Remember that name, and you could ask me how many times he's seen a water pit um, for practice in the last 4 years. Ask how many times you think you've seen a water pit to train?
Wow.
How many
Maybe
times?
every day? Not every day?
Zero.
Zero. Oh wow.
Yeah, we don't have a track with a water pit.
So how
So
do you do? How do you navigate? How do you get around that in order to meet your goal?
you recruit people who are a bit gritty and want to prove people wrong if they don't have everything they need. You have to recruit with people who have that mindset.
I like to talk about the right fit for a job. How
Mhm.
do you recruit? I know how you recruit your student athletes, but how do you recruit your staff? What do you look for? How do you find them? They come to you, or how do you find them?
A little bit of both. You find, well, people who end up coming to Georgetown, they don't leave. They stay because you find people who are like-minded, and I think some of that comes from being familiar with the environment, and they understand. Sometimes an outsider might see a Georgetown and think, "Oh man, they must have everything," but I find people who understand or have the belief in doing a lot with very little, and so you find people who have that, whose brain function that way, that entices them, that encourages them, that gives them, they're passionate about trying to do a lot with not having too much, and you know people who are viewing that the glass is half full,
Indeed.
versus what we don't have. Like we focus on what we have, and we allow our challenges to become opportunities.
I'm going to come back to Jamaica a little bit. There's a
Sure.
question I'm going to ask you about coaching and relay, but I'm going to leave that for last. But
Okay.
let us come back home a little bit.
Sure.
Your thoughts on Jamaica's success on the world stage to date?
Well, we bat way above our weight class. We've always done that. Like I said, I've seen Herb McKinley. Herb McKinley split 44-8 in 1952.
Mm-hmm.
We would use that on any relay
You know
for the
your
next 50 years.
history.
Yes, yes.
Very good.
So we've always had a rich legacy of success in track and field. Like I said, the you know, first world championship, we had a gold medalist in that event. We've always had exceptional talent in track and field. Um, per capita, I don't think there's any country in the world that produces the level of elite athletes that we produce. And I think it's, the high school system does create that environment. It's nature and nurture. Um, but we've been spoiled too. I think some of the success we've had, we tend to
We want
sometimes
it all
want
the
too much.
time.
Yeah, we wanted too much. So
Yeah, we want it all the time.
yes, so sometimes that's the other part of it, where you've been successful. The expectation is that that's how it will always be. I'll be honest, the women have always carried most of the load. You kind of look at Bolt and what he's done, but if you take him out of the equation, there's more women that have done much, much more. And, I,
Indeed.
and I'm not discrediting the Donald Quarries of the world and Bertland Cameron, but
I get you. Yep.
over
But you're
time,
right. You
yeah,
are right. You are right. You're
um,
100% right. Our collegiate system is at uh our collegiate system there's I'm trying to find the right word or the right term, but we do not have a collegiate system right now, as far as I'm concerned, for the past few years. And when I say
yeah.
that, I mean that we do not have a competitive collegiate system, a rich collegiate system. What
Mhm.
is missing in your mind?
I mean, you have the clubs. If you have a situation, GC Foster produces, has some talent. UTEC, I think, at one point was doing University of the West Indies. It requires money and infrastructure to ensure that it happens. And I think the club system, you have so many major track clubs
Change.
in Jamaica that some of those young people might lean more towards, the top talent is going to lean more towards going to a club versus, especially if they can get a pro contract, or I view it as a semi-pro contract. They're not going to necessarily lean towards, going towards the college system. So I think it's again, it's a business. It's do those schools have the resources to provide the support at the level that they need to entice people to compete in the collegiate system?
Should we start throwing around some data to our athletes, because when you look at some of our most Jamaica's most successful athletes, they've all gone through a collegiate program. We
It
don't.
goes, yeah, it goes both ways. So I mean, they'll look at, well, the reason why it'll be a challenge, they're going to look at the Asafa Powell's, the Usain Bolts. They'll look at Shelly and Fraser Price. Elaine. They'll look at those examples to say the change took place when we stopped sending everybody overseas. But it's a balance to me. Not everybody is fit to stay in Jamaica, and not everybody is fit to leave.
But
But it's got a balance. Yeah,
even locally, we've had stars who have gone through the
the process.
collegiate
Yeah,
system in Jamaica.
right,
Shellyan went through the university system. Elaine,
right.
Sharon, so many of them have been through and I have spoken to quite a few athletes who have said that the collegiate system is one of the best part of their career, because at the
Hmm.
collegiate level, it teach you discipline, you become more
Right,
mature, you learn the sport over time.
right,
So by the time you get to pro, you would have had enough knowledge between high school and college. You would have gotten enough exposure for your pro transition.
right.
How important is the collegiate element of your development for track and field?
Well, remember what I started with when I said the collegiate system, they actually provide a means of support that you wouldn't need to be concerned about if you're, a pro athlete. That some of the organizational side of things, you don't have to worry about that. To me, the best part of what the collegiate system will do is force you to be organized, and occupy your time. One of the worst things that an athlete can have is free time, and if you're a college student, you don't have any. It's you think you do, but you don't. In order to stay, and I've found that the people who can balance both end up becoming even better pros because they've learned to be very disciplined with their time. And so, to me, that's the biggest benefit the collegiate system will do. It provides some structure that, if you follow that, will prepare you to, when you turn pro, you already know I need to be really, really disciplined and organized with my time, and that's something that you're going to learn. The time to learn that is between 18 and 21, 22, before you go off into the so-called real world and have
Yeah.
to start paying bills.
We Jamaica came to prominence, I would say, back in 1948 when we went to our first Olympic Games, 1948, 1952, with the likes of Mr. Arthur Wayne, Herb McKinley, George
Calabar
Roden.
guys, yeah.
Yes, that team. And I'm not sure how many people know, but I'm sure you know this, that we've won medal in the 800 meter. No,
Hmm.
we are absent in the middle and long distance at the global level. With your formal training and
Hmm.
experience, what do we need to do in order to find our way back to
Yeah.
this part of the puzzle?
Well, I want to give some credit. Again, it's the women. I think Jamaica's national record being broken in the 800 and the 1500 on the women's side in this summer. Natalia Gould Tapin ran 155.4, I believe, whatever. She broke the record at the last Diamond League meet.
Mm-hmm.
Young lady Tracy,
In the 1500
1500.
meters, yes.
Navaski Anderson in the men's 800. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's evidence there that shows that not everybody has to go the sprint route. I think that the the discipline it takes to run the mid and distance, as far as the commitment to the training, is a little bit longer. It's the time frame, that you're going to train. The training starts a little bit earlier, right? I think we can get back to it by looking at the examples of the people who are running fast and showing that we can do that. Not everybody who is running the 400 needs to stay at the 400. Some people need to move up, but it's also encouraging people to, the coaches have to be mindful of encouraging people to try different events. And I think there are examples there where there's quality, and again, it's nature too. It's if you're not willing to get up to go on long runs in the morning, you're not going to be a good mid and distance runner. I don't care how good you are. So some of that is going to come with having a different mindset of how you train. Um,
Is it that we have a sprint culture, sprint mindset that most of our athletes more geared towards sprinting as opposed to middle
Yeah,
or long distance, even though
it's
they do it at school to get the points.
it's
But
nature and yeah, it's nature and nurture. It's where, I mean, how much time is being spent to encourage them to focus on going, going towards the distance events. I think, like I said, even looking at not just Navasky Anderson, I think look at what's going to happen with Kamar Farkison next year. I think he's going to be another breakout.
I can't
He's now at
wait.
Texas A&M. So there's small, there's we're getting back to where, I'm glad you mentioned that, we're getting back to where we're supposed to be. Javon Blake, that ended up at Dartmouth. I think there are some examples. There are a few exceptions to that rule. I just think there needs to be a continued effort to encourage them to pursue those events. And it's, to me, in those examples, the people who are going to end up excelling have to go in a collegiate system in the US or somewhere else where the training environment will allow for that.
And
Um,
we need to stay close to them also to ensure that their development is going according to plan or how
yes,
they want it to go, because many time athletes will leave, go away to college, fall off, and there's no support, nobody
yeah,
check on them, nobody knows what's happening with them, and they just disappear, they become extinct from the sport.
yeah. It's
Ye-
complicated. It's not easy because you can get lost in the system. You can get here and your focus becomes, what am I
mhm.
going to need? How am I going to eat? How am I going to end up staying if I want to stay here? And
Yeah.
at some point you might decide that, track and field, like I said, it's not a major revenue generating sport. There's a very small percentage of people who are going to make a living off running. No matter how long of an athletic career you're going to have, your career off the track is going to be longer than your career on the track. I guarantee you that. Go do the
Mm,
math. How,
yeah.
how old is Usain Bolt? um, he retired at what age?
He retired at 30, was it 32, I think,
Okay.
2017. Yeah.
Okay, so
Hmm.
do the math and tell me, how long is his career going to be after that? I'm sure he's, all his business ventures and what he's doing beyond the track are going to be things that he's done and what he's going to do way long term. Of course, track and field created the environment for him to do that, but
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
he didn't plan to think, what's next, I think that's the part where they need to be mindful when you
And
hang the spikes up, what's going to be next.
and this is where we come in as a people. We have to teach them from there, become student athlete at the high school level. We have to teach them about the business. We have to teach them about retirement. What kind of life do you want after track and field? We
Right.
have to help them because they're not going to know just like that. Somebody have
Correct.
to bring it to them and said, look, sports is not going to last forever. You might get 10 years, 15 years. Some are very lucky to get 15, 20 years, but not everybody will get that. What do you want to do afterwards? Whatever
Correct.
little money you're earning, you need to invest here, you need to do this, you need to do that. So if we don't help them, then they are going to become a burden to us because
Mhm.
they're not going to have anywhere to live, they're not going to have any life, and then we will have to find it to help them because they are,
Right.
as far as I'm concerned, all our athletes are national treasures. we
Absolutely, I
don't
would
tr-
agree.
we don't treat them like that, but for me, our athletes are national treasures.
I would agree with that 100%.
So we have to start helping them from there at the high school level. And even if they never transition to become an athlete, then they should be able to transition in such a way that they will be okay. Just like
Right.
yourself.
Correct. I was gonna say I'm the perfect example. I don't have
There you
one
go.
medal from champs, but you need to look beyond. There's so much within the sport that you can um, earn or create a career from the sport beyond just on the oval. There's a lot. There's a lot that you could do. I'll give an example. The marketing side. You talk about technology. There's so much marketing that goes into. You think of a production of a track meet or the production of the New York Marathon. The work for the marathon starts the day after the marathon is over. What it takes to put together road races is an example. Like you could get into that industry and not even realize how much there is to do to be able to make a living and to have a career outside of being an athlete.
Indeed, indeed. I'm going to pick your brain quickly before we go. National duty
Hmm.
for coaches. Um, I'm sure you're following the sport, so you see what is going on, and like myself. But how do you think we should approach this thing when selecting coaches for national duties? I'm sure you know how the US do it. I know because I've been on their site and I've checked
Hmm.
it. But how do you think that we should select coaches for national duties, like coaches going to the Olympics or the World Championships with the team? Your thought on that as a director?
It's complicated to me because let me put it this way: we're acting like track and field is an individual sport, right? We do come together for relays, but when you have someone who's prepared you for the entire year, and to turn over the responsibility of you competing at the biggest meet of your season to someone who's not seen you the entire year, not every person is going to have a comfort level with that. Now, you can obviously have very competent coaches that can provide national duty, but just pay attention to the coaches who have decided that I don't want to be a part of that anymore because that will take away from the time that I can help my athletes. It's not easy. I think it gets, to be honest, it gets very political. I think there's
Hmm.
a lot of politics involved in it. I don't I don't wish to be somebody who would say I know how to figure out what makes the most sense, but um, giving coaches or giving athletes access to their coaches when it makes sense is something that's important. I think that's very important, but also having an understanding of if the national coach, if you have coaches that are representing the nation as far as a coaching staff, are mindful of working with those coaches. That's part of, to me, what would be a solution. It's not an easy, Heather. It's hard for me to answer your question and
I
make it
know.
succinct because
Yeah.
I think the average coach or the average athlete is going to say, I want my coach who's prepared me the entire year to be somebody I have access to. And that's not something easy to do.
Yeah.
Um,
As a coach, when you're putting together a relay team
mhm,
as a coach, how do you select your team? What are some of the attributes you look for in
mhm,
your athlete, especially your sprint relay? What are some of the
mhm,
things that you look for when you're going to pick four people to put
mhm.
on two curves and two straight?
All right, so I want to talk to the best relay is actually the 4x4, just so you know. That's the
I
best
know,
relay.
I know.
So we're
I
gonna
mean, I,
talk
I, I agree with you.
the two relays. So we talk 4x1 first. I like to
Yes.
run. I like to run from in front. So I actually, a lot of my sprinters don't like that I do this, but I usually lead off probably my best starter, and I probably put my best athlete on the backstretch. I like to run from in front. I like to put pressure on the other team and like come and get us. So my approach is always to run from in front. The other thing is team chemistry. Not every your best sprinter might not be somebody who actually knows how to run through the zone and actually take the stick or give the stick in a way that keeps you moving through the zone. So team chemistry or chemistry between the four athletes is a big thing, and some people don't understand that sometimes how a relay is set up might be dependent on those factors. But my approach is I prefer running from in front. So when Jamaica ran one of their best 4x1s, it was with Asafa anchoring and Bolt wasn't anchoring to me. I'd like when Bolt ran the third or Johan Blake ran third. um, the, Nesta Carter to Michael
Michael Freight.
Frater. I think those two had a lot of chemistry. They trained together all the time. It was easy to get the stick around, and Frater was a great starter. Nesta Carter could run a good backstretch, and you know, Johan Blake could run an exceptional turn. And Bolt, you let him close. But to me, chemistry comes into play. You want to have people who understand each other and almost like you can't see the stick when they're running.
Indeed. Tell me a little bit about the long zone because I realize that we don't use the long zone that much. tell me about the long zone in the relay, because they've now changed from, I think, 20 to 30 meters. And we don't seem to use the long zone a lot, but I realize that the long zone works a lot for America.
Well, it again. Well, it started working a lot recently for them. I don't know if
Well,
the
especially
history.
with
Yeah,
their women, they don't seem to get it wrong. They hardly get
well,
a 4x1 wrong with their women.
um,
Well,
it's half and half.
for
Yeah,
the
it's yeah,
men, we dominated
yeah,
the, you know, that era with the dream team, but
yeah.
with their women on paper, you know, they've done,
Well, the best relay they ran was from lane one. I think when they
and
ran
I
with
think so
yeah,
too.
yeah,
2016 at the Rio
yeah,
Olympics.
yeah. It's chemistry. It's team chemistry. A lot of it is chemistry. It's not even so much the zone. It's having a comfort level where you're gonna run through the zone and it looks like you don't even realize the stick has exchanged hands. You have to have that understanding. It's trust that comes with having relay camps, having some trust, spending enough time working with each other to make the stick move without you feeling like it's slowing down at all. So I don't think it's so much just using the zone, but they know where they're supposed to be in the zone, and they're going to make sure that whoever, if you're putting Alison Felix on the back stretch, you want to give her the stick early because you want her to be able to run the longest leg, and you know that. So you put, you know, I forgot her name, the jumper, who's really, really quick. So she's going to get the stick to her very, very
Oh
quickly.
yeah, that's Tiana
Tiana, yeah,
Madison
yeah,
Bartoletta. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She was a beast out of the blocks.
right.
Yeah,
So,
indeed,
and
indeed.
that's why I
So
said, yeah.
you're saying is that you like to put pressure on your opponent. So your best starter and your strongest person on the back.
Backstretch, yeah, and
I
it
like
depends
that.
how good the team is. Yeah, it
I
depends
like
how
that.
extensive your team is, but I like running from in front.
Yeah, I like that. And your curve should be what, your best curve runner. The
If
curve.
possible, well, you want to have a curve runner who also knows how to take the stick and give the stick. So it goes both ways. But yes, you want to have, like I said, Johan Blake and Bolt when they both ran curves, probably best curves.
Fabulous.
Most people would have not put Bolt on a curve, but he runs an exceptional curve because he's a
Yeah,
great 200 runner.
yeah,
So you want
indeed.
somebody who's gonna be really, really aggressive on the turn and not, not be worried about running out of the zone. Just really be really, really aggressive.
In training, do you have to practice the zones, the short zone as
Absolutely.
opposed to the long
Um,
zone?
well, again, it depends. You have somebody. So again, this is where coaching comes into play. If you have somebody who's usually blind and has a tendency to leave early, you're going to adjust how much space you give that person. And you have people who will always leave early no matter what. So you have to be mindful of who you're using. So to me, it comes down to chemistry. You have to see that in training to know if it makes sense. So it's not so much, again, to me, it's not so much long or short zone. It's more about your the athletes that you have.
Tell
It's
me
who
about
you
the
have.
4x4. Tell me about the 4x4 quickly.
I'm a big fan of 4x4s. Also, I like running from in front too. So I like leading off 400 hurdlers, people who are strong to get to get the stick going. I like to have people on the backstretch who or the second leg who have some leg speed. And so that to me, and then you want to anchor somebody who's just very aggressive and not afraid to leave it all out there. Somebody who when they get a stick in their hand, they're a different person, like a Javon, for
I
instance.
like that. Yeah, I like that. Quickly, I'm sure you watch the championship and everything. I know
Mhm.
that there are a lot of high moments for Jamaica. Give me one. Which was your best moment for Jamaica at the World Championship in Budapest?
Wow, it's hard to pick one. One of I
I
think
know, right?
Sharika, I would say I'll give you one female and one male. I think
Okay.
Antonio Watson winning the 400 for me, because it's again I've talked to Bertland Cameron at the trials in July and talked about what he did 40 years ago, and to see Antonio Watson, 21-year-old do that again, was really amazing. And Sharika Jackson, I'd love to see when athletes run and they look disappointed after running really, really fast, not getting the world record, but feeling like there's still so much more to achieve. So I like when athletes run and then they're not satisfied because they want to achieve more.
They
So
want to improve.
as fast as she ran, it was good. I like that look of disappointment on her face, knowing that she really wants the world record.
With that said, Coach Alton Mackenzie, thank you very much for being here tonight. And you have shared a lot. And thank you very much for your service, as they would say. And thanks for your contribution to our track and field legacy. And you continue to give back. You continue to do great things abroad. And of course, you have Jamaica attached to you. And of course, you have Calabar attached to you also. Thank you
Absolutely.
very, very much for that. And continue to do a great job, Mr. Director. And I will give you the last words.
Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for creating this platform. I'm excited to, always excited to speak track and field with people who are passionate about the sport. And um, I'm an example of what can be done, regardless of, you don't need to be the best athlete to have an opportunity to be successful in the sport. And there's many ways to get to the level of success in athletics beyond just on the oval. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing continued success for our Jamaican student athletes and coaches um, across the globe. I think we have a rich history of track and field that we are part of. What makes track and field special globally.
Indeed, indeed. Coach, thank you very, very much. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us and, sharing what you do. And thank you very much for also helping our young people to realize their dream through academics and sports. Thank you very much for doing such a great job. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks so much for having me. It was a great pleasure. Enjoyed having this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. Of course, again, with Coach Alton Mackenzie. He wears so many hats. I mean, he's the director for track and field, he's a coach, he's a recruiter, he's a mentor. He is everything. And of course, he is a true Jamaican and he is a true Rabalat man. And guys, thank you very much for being here wherever you are. I see I have some outstanding people on the live. Thank you very much, Regina Montague, who is also another coach, outstanding in her time for Titchfield High School, and of course, outstanding coach for Dintil High School. Jacqueline Dehaney, thank you very much, outstanding track and field fan. Marlene Green, thank you very much, another track and field fan. Former Dintil girl. Olympian Ruth Williams Simpson, 3 times Olympian, 1972, 1976, 1980. Ruth Williams Simpson, thank you very much for being here. Sandy British, my producer and marketing and everything. Sandy's a little bit of everything. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you guys for making this show happen. I saw Xavier early. I saw Sharon Bailey. Thanks to each and everyone, and thanks to my people over on Facebook for being here. Of course, guys, you know that I am here to share the knowledge, to talk to our athletes, our coaches, our fans, and of course, I want to have some track fans on the show very, very soon. So, track and field fans, please line up on yourself to be on the show to talk about what you like about the sport, your experience, your favorite athlete, whatever you want to tell me. Get ready for that. And of course, next week, I'll be back in the athletes corner with an outstanding quarter miler. I won't tell you who it is, but it's an outstanding quarter miler. Please stay tuned for that. That will come out by Monday in the post. But guys, thank you very much for being here. Have a good night, have a good evening, have a good morning wherever you are. And of course, we continue to support our Jamaicans wherever in the world they are doing good things for the sport. Thank you guys very much. Have a good night, a good morning, a good evening, whatever it is. Thank you all for being here. Peace. And remember, one Jamaica. Yes, one Jamaica. It doesn't matter where we are, it is one Jamaica. Thank you very much for being here, guys. Have a good one. Peace.